Today is June 6th, actually. Wow, interesting. 6/6/2020. Interesting. Particular, are we in a simulation or not? It covers that, as well as who are we and what are we? Where does our consciousness originate? So I'm going to ramble a bit, but it's starting to come together for me. I've been wanting to know what intention is. Well, I know from logic that can't be denied that consciousness and warped space-time arise together. They're one and the same thing. And they're also one and the same thing with the feeling of existence. And they come from the great void. They're made from a substance called the great void. And everything I say before and after now is based on a certain logical construction that we think it's our brain and our nerve firings, whatever it is, whatever information exchange phenomena creates this awareness and this stream of information, whatever that is, comes from something. And it's limited by what it comes from. So since it comes from, let's just say, I'll just make up what it comes from based on what we think it comes from. It comes from our brain, okay? Okay, so people say, well, your brain's connected to everything else. Well, of course it is, because I know that. It's part of Blaney theory of etheric flux. But for the purposes of talking about physics, I'm going to use a lot of colloquial beliefs that we have, such as the model that I create of my universe is generated somehow within me, Carol Blaney. And I'm going to say, well, it's probably has something to do with my nerves being fired. And it probably also has to do with every atom in my body, but just in a general sense, okay, it's coming from my nerves. Because if you just stopped my nerve firings, I wouldn't be thinking about that anymore. I'd be maybe experiencing the ether somewhere else, okay? But when I'm experiencing the ether as understanding who I am as I'm being me, that comes from, at least in my model, this kind of sensory region right here. Let's just say it's similar to a computer, but it's biological. And so when I woke up, and I'm not trying to judge this, I'm just reporting what my subconscious figured out, that we humans are in our model as well as in reality the sum total of all the etheric substance that flowed within us, because gravity is the ether flowing inward to our massive body. So we are the sum total of all that ether over all of time since t=0 of my birth. That would define me in this lifetime. And so we are the history of the universes within us, because the ether that flows inside me is what makes up the universes within me, just like the ether that flows inside my body is what makes up me. And the ether that flows inside my body, further inside into the universes within, the fractally nested whirls and swirls of the etheric acceleration patterns, those are very complex. They go down to the smaller and smaller size scales, down to 1/infinity length scale, which is 0. So there's no stopping it. You keep having the size scale to make a smaller universe, or maybe not having it, but maybe multiplying each subsequent size scale by 1/10⁻², and then you get the next size scale down. Well, all those universes of those smaller size scales are what make up me. And yesterday, I'll talk on this more later, I hope, but yesterday I realized that those universes are the mechanism that could hold all of our memories. Not anything out there in the ether, although everything's connected. I'm not denying that, but the most substance, the most easily accessible place of that information is within me. Not in my nerves per se, but in the universes within those nerves. Now, a skeptic would say, oh, Dr. Blaney, your body regenerates every 7 days for the most part, and then maybe your bones take 7 years to regenerate, but so you lose all that mass. So all the universes in that mass is gone. So it's no longer you. You've been merged with the universe. But there's one part of the body that remains in you for your entire life, and that's your nervous system. So I think that and it's the nerves, not every molecule in the nerves, but there's certain molecules in the nerves that stay there forever. And so whatever those are, that's where a lot of memories are probably stored, in the inner universes within. That's a hypothesis. But it doesn't matter that we'll never be able to prove it, at least not that I know of, unless the smaller beings can come up here and communicate it to us. But see, the smaller beings within the universes in the ether, in my nerves, for example, those smaller beings have a much different time scale than we have. And so, they go a lot faster, kind of like an ant, lives for less time than we do. But that ant experiences a very full life and probably has deep thoughts and has a lot of informational exchanges with its environment, as many as we do in our 100 years of life. That ant does it in X months, however long an ant lives, maybe 1 year. I don't even know, but just say it's 1 year. A lot of bugs live, a few weeks, a few months, maybe a year. So that gives us a hypothesis. So the value of this rumination says that, okay, so now I see a possible way that we can store our memories and not have them be like in the brain tissue, So, because people are always saying, where are the memories? I challenge you to find them. Well, of course, we can never find them because they're stored in something so small that our instruments can't measure it. Because our instruments are based on measuring light and how light interacts with matter, and that's it. So, and maybe other particles, little subatomic particles as well, but nothing smaller than that, and so, but I'm saying the memories are stored in things even smaller than that. In the same sense, the larger being of which we're a part, our God, stores her information in us and in our innards, So it's a nested storage of information that goes down in size scale to 0. So there's an infinitely number of nested universes that store information. And perhaps the relevant ones for our lifespan of time, 100 years of life, is you only need to know what goes on X number of levels in to smallness. And maybe below that it doesn't matter. So let's just say only one level in, all that information can be stored there. The one society smaller than us. And maybe that has everything. Or maybe you have to go down 3 levels. We don't know. But just, again, I'm hypothesizing a way, a physical, understandable, visceral way that memory can be stored in the ether. Besides just saying, like before this realization, I thought that, yeah, it's stored in the ether. I can see that. But how is it maintained? Because light and other wiggles go so fast and they separate so quickly that how is that information accessible? Because it's spread out and it gets randomized, or seemingly randomized. It's more like chaos, which is not random, but it seems like random. So, but if it's stored within in inner libraries, just like our libraries are stable in time, there's a period of time where they don't change. You can go to the library and read the same book over and over for your whole lifespan. It doesn't change, right? So within us, maybe there's other storage mechanisms that don't change, such as the inner libraries, the inner stable toroidal condensed etheric movement within us. And there's light, and then there's condensed light. The condensed light is mass. If you have wiggles that are of the same shape as light, but of the size further down, I would call it a tornado of smaller size scale. And in our lifetime, the tornado of our size scale, along the past dimensions comparable in the order of magnitude related to Planck's length, that's our universe. We call it light. And then in the bigger, gigantic universe, the next bigger one up might be the twisting formation of etheric flow that might mimic what's in a wormhole, because I know that's like a twisted, probably, shape. Okay, everything curves and twists. So, but I'm thinking though that a wormhole is actually the temporary formation of two light photons as they separate and become entangled. In the middle is a strand where maybe temporarily you can traverse the universe. I don't know. I mean, that is true speculation, and it doesn't really say much other than that I'm hypothesizing that these flow pattern shapes and our perception of that it's a tornado, we understand a tornado, so we don't have to keep repeating it. We just call it a tornado. We don't have to recalculate what it is in our mind, because everybody knows what a tornado is and kind of like how the particles of dust flow in a tornado. Well, so on a smaller scale it's light, below that it's a tornado at a smaller scale, and then above that is a tornado at a bigger scale, which some scientists might call wormhole, but I think that you can have the two entangled light particles or entities going apart from each other that could appear separate with their own wave function that's actually one wave function that's superimposed on one another. Now, when they say entangled electrons, this is an aside, okay? So when entangled electrons unentangle, there may be a way to unentangle them and then make their waveform or wave function split into two. But I don't know. I kind of think they're still connected because everything is connected. So we are the sum total of all the ether that has flown within us, and all the history of the universe is within us. And since only matter inside us that stays us is the nerves, then our nerves are where our history and memories are. I'm writing my scrawled dream notes. Yet every wiggle of the ether can be seen by all. So it's both us and them. It's connected to both us and them. And the mass that does leave our bodies carries our life imprinted on it as well. The me is sort of in nerves most strongly. I kind of said that. So then if I want to model the cat, i.e. create the cat's consciousness and belief system with the model, modeled via a computer that's made out of mass, for example, the model must predict etheric flow patterns and the resultant interactions of those flow patterns, both inwardly and outwardly. So it would have to predict me, my brain, my body, my nerves, etc., and the world and universes within, and the world and universes without or outside. But no computer can model everything unless all of reality is the computer model. So the entire cosmos is the idea, period. So the entire cosmos is both the program and the reality. So it's modeling itself and it is itself. The model itself is the universe. So when people say, we're a computer simulation, but actually, if you're simulating yourself, then you're not a simulation. You are yourself. So rather than say the universe is a computer simulation, I would like to refine that, or maybe correct it and say, it's like a computer simulation because you think that the flute is solid and real, when in fact, it's flowing liquid. That is itself consciousness. And almost everything that everyone says up until this point that I've ever heard, no matter how correct it may be, there's always one thing that bugs me, and that is when they say, when they say, you're not created by the universe. This is someone else talking. Okay, they keep saying this. You're not created by the universe. You create your universe. That's partially true, but it's also partially true that you are created by the universe. I say, and believe and feel and know, that we are the universe. Not only do we create the universe, but the universe creates us. But the universe is us, because it's all one big fluid called the void. And as it starts to flow, it becomes something. It develops inertia because of the infinitely nested flows. And the simple way that I remember how that works is infinity, the infinite number of flow patterns and flows and nestedness of the flow, times zero viscosity sort of adds up to 1. Because mathematically it is that way. Infinity over infinity is 1. And 1 over infinity, which is 0, times infinity is 1. So it comes to a non-zero number. That's why we have inertia, and that's why we can exist. I'm talking to myself because this is a journal note. The reality / simulation coexist as one. That's my conclusion. When God spoke, did she say golden spiral? Because that's the magic number, at least in my mind, that has the magic of reality in it. That number that is as bigger as it is smaller. In other words, it's the thing that no matter how close in you zoom in on the spiral, it's the same spiral. And how far away you zoom out, it's the same spiral. And that, my friend, is why everything seems to repeat. And on a spiritual level, when things happen around us in our universe, the fighting, the fear, whatever, then our body feels that, and then within us is fighting and fear. But if you can learn to, well, first of all, if you understand that you create your universe, even if you just pretend it, to start, just to try it out, to say, well, I'll never know if this is true, so I'll just pretend it and see if it works for me. So then when you think and generate thoughts of love outward, then your inner body is generating thoughts of love outward into you. So you feel what you exude. So your inward structure makes you feel loved as you radiate love outward. And if you're stuck in prison or in concentration camp or something like that, there have been people that have been able to generate positive thought there and become enlightened and awake while they're there and actually not suffer too much. So, wow. I think knowledge is power in that if you understand the nested nature of the universe, and I guess what the Buddhists called emptiness is really, if you translate it properly, it's relativity. Everything is relative to everything else, but even more than that, I'm not sure what the term would be that I would call it. I'm working on that starting now, but I need to think of a word for that. But what the concept is, and it's trying to explain emptiness / relativity, but with my added understanding of how the nested realities work in the universe, so within, so without, so inside, so outside. It's the interconnectedness of everything, and everything co-creates everything else. So, again, all of this is limited by our model, our the mechanism of the flow of the ether. Now, if there's some meta bigger thing that's creating this infinitely nested void in a test tube, that could be true. There's something bigger than that has, and maybe it is somehow a program that figured out how to calculate this nested universe down mathematically down to under Planck's length, maybe several iterations down. And if it somehow can hold enough information to where it can actually calculate that, then it could generate our seeming universe, and then it would be a simulation in the way we normally define it. But even that is going to be several size scales removed from now, so that us in this size scale can't access that, because we're trapped in the test tube, if that makes sense. We're trapped in our current flow. So since that's all we have to go by, it's enough for me, It seems it is infinite in and of itself. And like I say, if this particular life only needs several nesting levels of information exchange in order to predict the 100-year lifespan, then that's all we need. Then yes, in that case, you could simulate this universe if the bigger universe was able to do that. But me in this universe, I am not, because all I have available for me for tools are the mass and the light in my size scale. That's the way I see it now. Maybe more knowledge or understanding will come later that'll help me understand how to get to the smaller levels. But nobody can model the whole thing. You can only model enough to give you temporarily what you want to see, because it's infinite, and you can't build a machine that's bigger than infinity. And as I talk and I say this, more eloquent in words people that have already expressed these things, I don't realize it until I speak it, and then I go, this sounds just like Gödel's theorem, but Gödel talked about it kind of from a different perspective, kind of like from a mathematical proof perspective. That you can't ever prove anything, he said, because you would need a model bigger than the universe to prove anything, because everything's, and then Heisenberg's uncertainty principle also says this, that there's always going to be, you can only measure the mass or the momentum perfectly, but not both. And because, why is that? Well, another way to look at it is because the wiggles in the universe are nested. Okay, look, the number pi, we know the number pi. We can calculate it as many decimals out as we want, right? But we can't ever know the entire length of pi because it's infinite, and we'd never, at least we think it is, and we'd never get there. Our machines could crank it out for hundreds of millions of years that humans live, and it would never calculate the full number of pi. You can only express it as a ratio of two numbers that are whole. So, the irrational numbers. So, in the same sense, we can only calculate precisely what could ever, a flow of events until we run out of time. And so I'm kind of saying the same thing. So maybe there's no need probably to share this video with anyone because it's already been said. I'm just saying it in a way that I see it. And as I think these things, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm on the right track because it matches Gödel, it matches Heisenberg's uncertainty, and it matches Einstein because basically I'm starting with his premise that ether accelerating through you is the same as you accelerating through the ether. And there's also this underlying pre-existing zero-point field that may affect you differently whether you're moving relative to its center of gravity or not, but that's a whole nother. And I have to give credit to Seth here because some of the ideas that I just dreamed on and woke up with, these insights, probably came from listening to Seth yesterday in a stream, a YouTube stream by Brian Scott, who read some of the Seth materials online. And as I listened to the Seth material, I got my own insights, which may or may not be the same as what Seth was saying, but it's definitely what I believe. And what he said helped me understand my own thoughts and ruminations about physics better. These inner nebula, these inner zero-point field virtual particles, are not really virtual particles at all. They're not virtual. They just seem virtual because in our time scale they seem to disappear very quickly. But in their time span, they go a long, long, long time, trillions and trillions of years in their clocks, the way their clocks tick. And they move and intercommunicate at a much faster rate with respect to ours. So our life and our past life and memories are stored in these smaller universes, which are jam-packed with libraries ad infinitum in the ether, in the tiny societies, I call it, so above, so below. And so, yes, so this was part of my morning thoughts because this is connected to them. The neurological path, neurological pulses are within my body. Past, future life memories are stored as ghost images. Okay, so these are just straight from what Seth said. I'm just taking notes. Okay, so this is Seth. I'm not sure if it means anything to me. The ghost images is what I would call what we think is a solid object. It's a ghost image. The image of this is a useful image, but it's not pure reality because deep down I know it's a fluid that's flowing in a pattern that's very stable. It doesn't want to be moved. Just like if you touch the edge of a waterfall, your hand feels resistance. Or it might be pulled in. In this case, there's a resistance. All right. My theory could explain this image Seth is giving me. I'm writing this down. It's actually my spirit guide telling me, Carol, your theory could explain this image that Seth is giving you. It may even be Seth's image. But it surely is my image. Yeah, that's just what I was saying. I'm not sure if I'm getting what Seth is saying, but it's definitely helping me understand my own theory. And it's my guess is probably is the same thing because my developments of my theory seem to match everyone else's, just in a different viewpoint, which tells me I'm on the right track. But I still think my viewpoint is useful because it's helping me understand it when I couldn't understand it with Heisenberg's and Einstein's viewpoint alone. I think the main thing that I offer is understanding that we are co-creating our universe. So when you pray, it's not all me, 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 I'm creating this, but the universe is creating me as well. And it's all one big thing. It's not us, it's never us and them. That's the main thing. Notes to myself. Okay, so here's a question. Am I, that is, my awareness, my I, my now, my presence, my experience, is this I, the space-time warpage flowing inward towards and into me, concentrating in a human-shaped electromagnetic field of inward flow, question mark? And here's a picture of that. So is my awareness localized in my body as the ether flows there into my nerves, which store my memories of this life? That is a hypothesis and a question that I ask. All hypotheses are questions inherently because they're not proven, but they're saying. Here, let me show you the picture. Ta-da. Now, I don't need a time machine to alter the past or future. Past events grow and are not finished. Again, these are words of Seth. And it spoke to me, okay? I don't need a time machine to alter past and future, is what Seth said. So it's speaking to the reality of what time actually is. And our perception of what we are gives us this structure that we see it as time. We see this as a flute and we see it as time, but it's not that inherently. It's just how we label it so that we can play with the variables and build flutes, you see. Without some kind of a model that we use to talk about the reality of our universe, we can't create and build things out of the building blocks of the universe. So we need these models. Models, I mean ways of talking about it. Our models are our language. So I like what Seth said here. Past events grow and accumulate. We are not finished. So the storage of information within me, within my nerves, for example, as Carol the human, continue to accumulate knowledge and grow, and I'm creating myself in the future. And that's where the information is stored. So that's the end of this collection of random thoughts. And the only way I would ever post this is, one, to save it, because I'm not very organized. Two, after maybe I am reincarnated into someone else, someone else might post this if they think it's worthy, but it could never be posted until my theories were widely accepted, and then they could go back and go, oh look, here's Dr. Carol Blaney's theory, and she's talking about it here in a very disjointed way, and then it might inspire people to not be afraid to talk about things that aren't fully hashed out. But I'm not making this video to say, look world, here's my theory, because it's very unfinished. But these are my ruminations, and this is what listening to Seth does for physics. If you broaden your input of information, it helps you in your field. This also helps me with my art, because my art is all about trying to depict flow patterns on canvas. Well, okay, it's been a while. It's a nice little conversation that I had with myself. Signing off. Peace.